Hey guys, welcome to this edition of the Cover One Buffalo postgame show. Not as fun of an edition as we had last week, but that's all right. Greg Tompsett and I are here to get you guys covered up on what happened to the game and talk all about it. Greg, you're back at home. How you doing, man?
I was told that I would simply be here for the winning. I don't understand what's going on here.
Yeah, so about that, you were supposed to be a lucky charm. I don't know if you get demoted. I got to talk to Eric about that. You're 1-1 now, so we might give you another week and see if you can bring it back. But I mean, come on. Even though we talked about it a little bit at the end of our pre-game or matchup podcast about how nice it would be to get the win, I don't know that. And I posted something about this. I think that people's expectations and going into this week got totally misaligned from a surprise upset game of the Vikings for any team, let alone a team led by a rookie quarterback plus a bunch of other young guys, to go on the road twice in a row against really good teams and go 2-0 in that stretch is incredibly difficult. So I hope that people didn't get too up about that Vikings game, but from the looks of Twitter, it seems like people really got hurt today by what was happening. What do you think about that? Why are people so upset?
I think it's a whole cyclical thing. I believe that a lot of people came into the season with reasonable but low expectations, but not worst team in the league. So they're like, hey, we made the playoffs. I know some things didn't go our way, but our defense is still really good. I think we can scheme around the rookie quarterback. Tyrod wasn't any good anyways, whatever they were telling themselves. We were still expecting, a lot of people were talking 4 to 6 wins, but I think a lot of people really felt like, oh, maybe it's 7 to 9 wins still. And if it bounces our way, we're going to be able to make this happen. Then all of a sudden we get the doors blown off in the first 2 games and like, oh man, this is the worst. And then we're having to talk people off the ledge of the worst team of all time. So then all of a sudden, I think that Vikings game was this huge refresher for those, that demographic, to say, oh, we're still good. This is good. This is what I was expecting the whole time. We're going to shock some people here. We definitely still have, 6 wins, but maybe we get lucky here and go on a run. And I think a lot of people talk themselves into that narrative. And I can't lie, the thought snuck into my mind as well. And I really think it was a big dose of reality coming back to, this is still a flawed roster. It's still very young. We're eating a ton of dead cap. And these games are sadly probably going to be more common than the Vikings.
Yeah, no, totally. And it is something, like I said, we discussed it. And like you just said, the thought did creep into my head as well. I mean, if you were able to go into Lambeau and pull out 2 road victories against really decent to good teams, then you really have something that maybe people didn't see, and that you have something that maybe you could start to build a little bit of a, run with a team like that. But at the end of the day, I think you just hit the nail on the head that this roster is flawed. They're led by rookies at a lot of the key positions, or young players at the key positions as well. And so you go into a place like Lambeau with a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, those flaws are only going to get magnified in that type of environment. Rich here in the chat also says classic flat game after an emotional win on the road. Definitely a lesson to learn. Something that a young team has to learn is not just how to win, but how to do that with consistency in the NFL, because you have to put that one behind you, go on to the next week and prepare for that team. So I don't know what the preparation was like. I'd like to think that McDermott had his guys over the victory after that 24-hour window, but it's hard in the NFL. It's a marathon to go through those ups and downs and to consistently put a win or a loss behind you and come out the next week and execute. And that word execute is something I want to get into right now with you as we're going to lead here into the offense, because in the Slack channel and on Twitter, I think there was a lot of complaints about play calling. There was a lot of complaints about what the coaches are doing. Why isn't McDermott calling the plays? What is Daboll doing? Why doesn't he just do what he did last week? It doesn't work like that. It's never going to work like that. But I don't know, without watching the All-22 and getting a good look at what was happening downfield, I can't reasonably say that the play calling specifically was bad. I think there was a few plays that I would have liked them to run something different. But the play calling, I don't know that you can blame that as much as it was an execution issue. What did you see just from the broadcast watch?
Yeah, I mean, obviously somewhat limited in what we could see, but I think that it goes both ways in what you talked about, not only the emotional letdown from our team and how we executed, but also that honestly, in hindsight, the Vikings probably took us a little lightly, thought they were going to just kind of come in, say, hey, we're here. You guys can lay down now. And obviously that gave the Packers and Mike Pettin and their, the defensive coaching staff, hey, don't let this happen to us. And all of a sudden now our offense comes out, and some of the things, there were a couple of plays that I thought were solid. We talked specifically about, the action they had with both Ivory and Shady on the field, some eye candy with Shady going out in motion and a nice inside give there. There were a couple manufactured plays. We ran a quick screen once, I think. And then some of the plays that last week were nice, quick rhythm throws. Josh started so hyped up and so jacked up that he was throwing it 6-7 yards over the receiver's head, that I think that some of those play calls that we were patting Dable on the back for last week were still there. We just, like you said, execution wasn't there. Now, I'm sure there's stuff that Dable would like to have back. I'm sure there's some plays that we could go. We'll get into the box score here, but it's almost the exact same as the Vikings game last week. We let it get away from us. All of a sudden, now we had 40 pass attempts and 10 carries by our running backs, and just the Bills this year are not built to win any game with 40 pass attempts or 7 sacks, 33 attempts, and 10 carries by Shady and Ivory. That's just never going to be a recipe for victory.
No, it's not. And so, yeah, we got 16 and 33 for 151 yards, 2 interceptions, and also a fumble from Josh Allen there.
It wasn't a fumble. That was not a fumble.
It was not a fumble, but by league documentation, it will be considered a fumble. And then, yeah, LaShawn McCoy just not able to get anything going again. I do think that some of the conspiracy Twitter is going to start coming out about how maybe this team's better without LaShawn McCoy, which I think is nonsense at this point. Whoop, I got some feedback on my end. Sorry about that. There will be some nonsense on that. But let's specifically get into Josh Allen a little bit, because it's obviously a hot topic. One thing here before we get into this particular game that I just want to, I'm not going to ramble on or anything like that. I do just want to vent on this for a second, because I'm seeing it on Twitter. I'm seeing a lot of things, and I know that I'm going to get labeled after this a Josh Allen apologist going forward, and that's fine. But we're less than a month into this kid's professional career. We're talking about a kid that didn't get any D1 scholarships. He was playing community college football, begging people to give him a scholarship, went to a small school with no real talent to speak of. So he doesn't have the years of playing that your Josh Rosens, your Sam Darnolds do on big stages against big teams and top competition. So he is a raw prospect, something I thought we all knew going into this process, that he was raw. The team clearly didn't want to start him right away. He did earn that with the help of Nathan Peterman's poor play. So we have to understand where he is at in his development, and then know that development's not linear. We've talked about that a few times on this show, and know that, yes, he played well at times in the Vikings game, and the team did all that they could to help him to be in a position to play well. But he's the type of quarterback right now in his particular area in development where he needs a lot of help from his team, and clearly just did not get that on the offensive side of the ball today, but also made some mistakes that you expect from a young quarterback going up against the Mike Pettin defense that's had a chance to put some games of film together on this kid. So I just want everyone to pump the brakes a little bit on this kid's a bust. Blake Bortles has been still being called a bust, and he's playing great football right now. Mitch Trubisky had a great game today. He's been called a bust. As last week, people were calling that guy a bust. So let's just wait. I would urge fans, if you have the patience, at least give this kid somewhere between the realm of 16 to 20 games before we start labeling him anything. I'm not saying the kid's good. I don't think he is necessarily going to be the franchise. I'm not saying that, but let's wait a little bit and just allow this thing to ride out at least for 16 games. I would say maybe somewhere between 16 and 20. But let's talk about this particular game, because it was not very good.
Yeah, like you said, like I'm in the exact same boat you are. I was staunchly against Allen during the draft process. I was on my knees pounding the floor as the word, Josh, and waiting for the other last name to come out. But I'm the same thing. I get called an apologist and a homer for just trying to be reasonable. I'm not saying that he's the second coming and that, hey, we've got Joe Montana here. We're just saying that we don't know after 3 games. And the same people who were ecstatic last week after he looked nice against the Vikings, we have other people now who are already, I saw comments on Twitter about, well, we're going to have a top draft pick and now we need to make sure we use that on a quarterback. Questions about why we don't go back to Peterman. And it's just unrealistic to have that kind of week-to-week view and set of expectations that all of a sudden he's going to turn into that. And it's a lazy analogy, but I'm going to use it again. Jared Goff was the worst quarterback in NFL history through his rookie season. The statistical case was put together that for a reasonable sample size, not a Nathan Peterman sample size, for a full season sample size, he was the worst quarterback ever. And now looks like a franchise and people are talking about a potential MVP. Now, a lot of things have broken right. We are on that same hopeful trajectory of having 2 more off seasons to add offensive weapons and talent and to help unleash that. But that's what we need to hope for and wait for and not overreact so quickly and so early. I know that today was rough. We saw, again, the exact opposite of the Vikings game. The Vikings game, he had some quick early success, easy completions, and I don't think got touched by the Vikings until late in the second quarter. This week, he gets hit immediately on the very first drive, is obviously jacked up and overthrew his first 2 or 3 receivers, one of them by, I think, 6 yards. So obviously he was a little pumped and then got hit and started to see ghosts, and it kind of unraveled from there until he started to settle down a little bit during garbage time.
Yeah, and honestly, I hate to say it, but these are the type of games and lessons that are actually, I think, are good for a player's development if they follow the path that you expect them to follow, because there was a lot of teaching moments in this game. And I think that that's what Dable and Sean McDermott are going to do. They'll get into him on some of the stuff that he just did poorly, putting guys in bad positions, whatever it is. But there's a lot of teaching moments in this game. And Mike Pettin did a good job of getting him some experience of things that he for sure certainly never saw before and did not see in the college ranks. So I was trying to explain that in the Slack channel a little bit. Mental processing for rookies at every position is just, even if it's just slight bit slower than everybody else on the field. When you get a guy like Mike Pettin in there and he's making you think, even if it's just for half a second longer than any other defense is making you think, that half a second is enough to ruin the play. And that's what I saw without seeing the all 22 was happening to Josh Allen. Is he just, people were saying, oh, he's not calling out protections. And sometimes with Pettin, we should know as Bills fans from having him here, you don't know what protections to call out, because what he's showing you is not oftentimes where pressure is coming from or what the zone's going to be. He likes to get exotic, and maybe he didn't get that exotic. We don't know. But for a rookie like Josh Allen, you don't have to. So a lot of teaching moments here for Josh. I'm sure that they're going to teach him about the throwing across your body on third down when you're in field goal range. Not the thing that you want to see, but like Eric tweeted out, that is some of the Josh Allen experience that we're going to get, especially as a young guy. He's going to make some of those throws. He's going to take some of those sacks that could have been a 3-yard sack, and because he's trying to escape, it turns into a 11-yard sack. But with that bad, you're going to get the insane throw off a back foot that goes into the back of the end zone, or the throw to like Ray McLeod in the preseason, or some of the escape sacks that he has. You got to, with a guy like this, he'll never, I don't think, turn into a pure pocket passer like a Brady. You're going to have to take some of the good plays with the really, really bad plays.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's Mike Stock brought it up in here that there was a lot of old school Favre to that you used to get jacked up and overthrow receivers there. And I think that the comment also came up about what Mike Pettin did to Aaron Rodgers before when you had that kind of pressure. I think that the steps that we saw Allen take against the Vikings were missing today, in the sense of, hoping for their that next step. But you bring it up over and over again. Development is not linear. It's not always going to be consistent incremental steps forward. There's going to be 2 steps forward, 1 step back, sometimes 2 steps back. And we just need to hope that the good outweighs the bad, and that by the end we see overall development and positive relative trending. And I think that it's going to take a lot of patience to wait through that and to understand that that's what we're looking for, not this amazing only upward trajectory.
Yeah, I think you actually said it better than I've said it the 10 times I've tried to say it there. And I want to encourage everybody for this whole season and this team. I was just talking to somebody on Twitter about, they were really disappointed in this loss. And I said, well, were you going into the season rooting for wins and losses? Because I'm not. What I'm looking at and analyzing this team on is the development of everybody and the individual assessment of who is this future of this team and who's not going to be here in the next 2 years when they really start to load up. Because that's what I'm looking at is who's a part of this organization and this team moving forward in the 2019 and 2020 season. My brother's a big Bears fan. So I know a lot of Bears fans. I've talked about this before. I think the Bills are one season behind where they're at. You brought it up in the Slack channel where the Eagles, and how they've developed their team. So if you talk to a lot of Bears fans last year, not a lot of them were excited to watch the games. It was ugly football throughout the whole time. But certain players had key development all throughout the season. And they go and they load up. And now they're a very exciting team. Obviously, they make a huge deal for Khalil Mack. I don't anticipate the Bills being able to do something like that. But their preseason and their offseason was still good. And they loaded up to put around their rookie quarterback who has had some struggles this year, but they're still putting together and stacking wins. And that's what I expect to see is not the 2018 Bills having success, but this 2018 trending into the next two seasons with young talent. So we have to really evaluate these guys, not based on wins and losses and just really bad games, because it's going to happen. And we got 12 games left, guys. So if you're jumping off a cliff now, I got bad news for you. The winter's coming. It's going to be long, and it's not going to get much prettier, I don't think.
Yeah, it's going to be easy to get excited. I know in here, CR in the chat said, I'm really glad we're 1-3 and not 0-4. I made that point last week. It was such a blessing to get that win out of the way that in case we do go down a rough stretch, that people aren't literally worried about 0-16. Now, I do think we got a gauntlet out of the way here. I think Tennessee is probably a little tougher than we anticipated preseason next week. That's going to be a tougher game than maybe anticipated. That looks like a potential playoff competitor. But I still feel good coming back home. That's a team that we can run with. There's going to be winnable games down the stretch. There's going to be things there. Another great comment in the chat. Jim Kelly was 2-14 his rookie season. Troy Aikman 1-15. There's all kinds of examples of some really rough starts of some great quarterbacks. Now, again, we're not trying to say that Josh Allen is Troy Aikman, that Josh Allen is Jim Kelly. We're simply saying we're not going to know that answer, honestly, for the next 12 games. I doubt that we're going to know that definitively at the end of this season, but we sure don't know today. So all the calls for, again, I rattled off some of the ridiculous statements earlier about why don't we go back to Peterman, or good thing we have a draft pick for an early quarterback again. It's just crazy. This is an investment that this entire franchise, from the owner, front office, coaches, offensive coordinator on down, are all on a 5-year plan that we are early in year 2. And everything you brought up, whether we get as fortunate as what the Eagles and the Rams have been in their build, or maybe more realistically where the Bears are in kind of a middling road here, despite their monster game today. I think that's what we can expect, that we're going to see incremental gains, that we're going to see investment back into the offense. I know Matt in the chat brought up that it is tough. I don't know that we can expect a ton when, we'll probably get into it in a moment here, when Kelvin Benjamin is your top target and he seems relatively worthless, and having the lack of weapons that we have, it gets there. I know I'll make one comment that I do think the one thing I charged Dable with today is he needs to be the realist that can step back and see the forest from the trees when Allen is maybe having a rougher game. I do put it on him. You can't let us walk away from a game like this with 10 carries to McCoy and Ivory. I don't think he made bad calls in the offensive calls he had. If some of those are executed, some catches are made. There was the one to Andre Holmes that would have been a great third down pickup. There was a couple deep that, if the timing's a little bit better, we hit on, in hindsight, that's easy, but he could have simply called a couple more runs here or there, gotten creative to get some movement there. We are not going to be able to be in a position to win a lot of games with 10 carries, by the running backs. And it's, simply putting us in a tough spot to expect that.
Yeah. And the point you made about, somebody said that it's hard to develop without the offensive weapons. I keep going back to the Bears. If you look at the Bears season last year, Mitch Trubisky comes in and he's thrown to nobodies. I mean, Deontay Thompson got cut from that team, but he was probably their third best wide receiver at the time he got cut. They had literally maybe the worst skill positions outside of their running backs in the league last year. And so I don't know that I think the development that we're talking about is putting some game tape together, getting a feel for the speed of the game, seeing what defenses are doing and what that looks like under center, so that you can start to read how to anticipate that, communicating with players. So not all the development that we're looking to see is stuff that's going to show up in box scores or things like that. So I think that development is a 2 to 3 year trend development. As you get the weapons, we'll start to see that. And I think you're right. I don't know that it's going to be as good as some of the teams that have developed this way are going to be. Like you said, we just don't know who Josh Allen is, but that's not whether he's a bust or if he's actually going to be the guy. But we're going to talk about Josh Allen all year long. So
yeah, undoubtedly.
Yeah. So, but let's move on to some other guys, because obviously we couldn't get Shady McCoy going. Chris Ivory only gets 6 carries for 15 yards. So none of the running backs get going, doing anything. Obviously, it gets even worse for the receivers because the passing game was so down. Kelvin Benjamin, 1 catch for 34 yards. That's not number 1 receiver quality. He's just not doing it. His body language to me isn't there at all as well. Some of the comments that he's made to the media isn't there as well. So I don't know. I hate to be one of those guys that's started to talk about trades or anything like that, but I don't know how long McDermott and Bean are going to tolerate the comments in the media that he's been making or the body language that he's presenting. I don't know that they want that around a young team. That kind of thing's toxic. Zay Jones puts up a few catches late in the game when it doesn't really matter, and they're kind of in a soft zone coverage. Charles Clay, I thought, got off to a decent start, had some good catches, but then they kind of went away from Clay. I thought he was had the potential to have a nice day, but just not really anything impressive, obviously, with a tough day from any of the skill players. Did you find anything?
I've been digging for the past 3 hours trying to find something, and I don't know that I've unearthed anything exciting yet. I think we're in a weird spot where Kelvin Benjamin is a disappointing malcontent who has poor body language and is probably not helpful in the locker room and is our best wide receiver. And that's just such a weird place to be, in that, does that matter? Do we need him simply because we're already at the lower tier of any wide receiver core in the NFL, if not arguably the worst? Can we afford to trade off our best wide receiver who doesn't want to be here, isn't contributing, is making selfish me first comments in the media, and assumably is not contributing from a leadership standpoint in the locker room? That all of those things immediately spell a trade candidate to me from what Bean has shown in the past. That's not far from the Sammy Watkins and Ronald Darby scenario. I have no idea what kind of value Benjamin would have, but there's not dead cap associated to it. He's on the last year of the rookie guarantee. I think it's very unlikely we would sign him in the offseason, but let's assume, let's take the stance right now that we do find a way to move him for some kind of value. What does that leave us? So now we're going to run out Zay Jones and Andre Holmes as our top 2 receivers. We're going to have regular run for Foster, I guess. I don't know if we would somehow move to more 2 tight end to get Kroom back in there. I just don't know what we would do. So I'm actually of the mind I would rather see the addition by subtraction. I would rather get some kind of asset for Kelvin Benjamin simply to get him off this roster. But I don't know what we do the next day. I don't even know what our next step would be.
Yeah, no, but I think I forget the term that they call it. Gets brought up a lot when you have something invested, right? So they've traded for Benjamin. There's an investment there. And
sunken costs.
Sunken costs, right?
Yeah.
So I don't want them to get caught up in the sunken cost of what they get something for him, essentially. If there's anything that you can get out there in the league for him right now, because really the value is only going down, and teams know that the body language there, they see the comments in the media, they know he doesn't want to be there. So the trading value isn't going to be high at all. He just doesn't have the production over the last 2, really 3 seasons to put that there. Somebody asked, is he really our best receiver? I think it's not even close to a question that he is the best receiver when his head's in the game and he's getting the targets that he wants. He's absolutely the best receiver. He's the only receiver with any type of NFL production. He's the only receiver that has the body type that he has and can win just based on his sheer size. Obviously, Holmes has the body, but doesn't have as big of a body. So I think there's no doubt in my mind that he is the best pass catcher on this team when his head's in the game, but his head's not in the game. It's clear that he doesn't want to be here. So I agree. At this point, move on from him. But yeah, it's scary that if you move on from him, what do they do? I guess you roll with the Zay, Andre Holmes, Ray McLeod, Foster.
Robert, maybe even promote Cam Phillips.
Maybe get Cam Phillips up here, see what he's got. I mean, honestly, that doesn't sound a whole lot worse than what the Bears were running a year ago. They did have Cam Meredith, but he got injured. So he was coming off that injury. So I don't know that it's the worst thing ever, especially if you're not, I hate to say it, I don't think they're tanking intentionally, trying to lose games, but if you're not concerned about wins and losses, but you're more concerned about the development and evaluation of players, get this guy off here because he's not a part of the future. And if you can get anything in return at this point, let's do it and see what you can get. But I think the problem is going to be is if that becomes that infectious, contagious, negative attitude starts to seep to other players in the locker room. That's a bigger problem than what you lost to get Benjamin.
Yeah. You have to write that off that we already got our third round pick value back from him in the season that we got. We had the opportunity to evaluate him, and thankfully we did not re-sign him in the offseason already. That's clearly a guy we don't want in this locker room long term. But either way, I think whether we get a little bit more run out of him or we run out the rest of the season and let him go on his way and maybe look for the compensatory pick that we would get by letting him sign elsewhere. It is what it is. I don't think that that's going to be, he obviously is not going to be producing at a level that's going to impact wins or losses. So whether it's him, being there for a couple plays, or we roll the dice and probably have a little bit more frustration with a Robert Foster or Cam Phillips level talent, we're not going to have a ton of support around Josh Allen. That's all the more reason that we need consistent run game support. I actually think LaShawn McCoy and Chris Ivory, for being 30-year-old running backs, are a great combo. I think that they're a legitimate thunder and lightning kind of thing, but we have to be able to be in game scripts where they can play. I actually think we have an intriguing tight end depth chart. Everybody hates on Charles Clay. I think if you took his contract out of there, he's a perfectly reasonable NFL tight end, and is just overpaid for what he's doing. But I actually think Jason Kroom has some potential. I think Logan Thomas has potential. I like the idea of Kaiir. He had a very rough game today, but I think that there's some pieces there that could contribute in the future. And then, as a lot of people have brought up here, the huge salary cap space we'll have, high picks in each round. I think that we're going to be able to add some serious weapons in the offseason and in the draft going forward. So it's just like you said, trying to find who can we evaluate that has a chance to be on this team in 2020, and everyone else is simply, kind of, if I'll use a baseball analogy, they're eating innings and just getting the snaps to get through the season.
Yeah, maybe you find somebody in that mix that's a good contributor for the team next year, but not a star, right? So maybe you find out and evaluate that some of those guys are going to be contributors to your team moving forward. But to the wide receiver and weapons thing, from people that are smarter than me, because this time of year I don't get to watch much college football. I kind of turn on that tape, if you will, as soon as the season for the NFL ends. But everybody that's smarter than me about that stuff says it's a very deep wide receiver class. In fact, that the Bills could probably get some really good starting day one talent between the second and fourth round. Those guys are going to be out there. So that's encouraging to me to know that the year where you have 10 picks, there's some guys at a position that you need there. I think there's some decent looking things in free agency. I know there's not going to be any big names, but guys that can come in and contribute around this offense better than what we've got here right now this year. So to LaShawn McCoy, though, you touched on it a little bit before about that maybe if you want to knock Dable for one thing, it was not getting the running game going. I think people don't think that he got going, but he had 4.8 yards a carry. That's pretty phenomenal, and I would have liked to see him go to that. Shady still got it. What do you want to say to anybody? I've seen rumblings of it that maybe they're better, because they won a game without Shady. Does Shady still have it? Do they really just have to, stick to their guns and get that run game and go? And even if they're down, what are your thoughts?
I do. I think that you have to be – it's discipline to me. I think that it's easy to get excited about chucking the ball around, specifically just trying to get additional reps on film to evaluate Allen. I think that that's going to be a constant temptation for Daboll and for McDermott. I think that you have to have the discipline to be able to continue to run the ball, and it can't be the stereotypical run, pass, stuff that's predictable and easy. You have to have some of the plays where you're lined up to go 5 wide. It looks like a big passing play, and you do an inside handoff. You have to be able to keep them off balance and have different motions. I think that we didn't see one jet sweep today. I don't think we saw any jet sweep motion or any of those kind of run plays. I'm fine putting McCoy out there in the slot and then bring him back on jet motion, run that play with the reverse of that play where you had Ivory and McCoy both on the field. Instead, start McCoy out there on the slot, bring him back, do the read option to him, and if not, give Ivory back up the middle. I think that you can be creative in the run game and stay disciplined to it, and that's only going to help Allen. We never got anything going there, so we never got any of the play action. We never got any of the momentum that we got there. And the idea that we're somehow better without LaShawn McCoy is crazy. The game script was nice last week. I think McCoy would have really eaten and had a huge game if we could have got him out there. And then today, he looked fine. He ran for 5 yards a carry. He had 3 catches for 5 yards. He had 5 yards per offensive touch, but he only touched the ball 8 times. He had 5 carries and 3 little swing passes. That's not him letting us down. That's a lack of discipline in the play call.
Yeah, no, totally. And we won't harp on the offense that much. I want to get real quick here, your thoughts on the offensive line. It's something we didn't talk about. Obviously led up some plays. I'm not going to say all of these sacks were on them. There were some coverage sacks. There were some Josh Allen fault sacks, but definitely had a tough time picking up some of the blitz, things like that. Just not super athletic guys. Specifically, something I want to ask you about, because I think it's going to start coming more and more, is the calls for Wyatt Teller. Do you think Teller gets in? Because he's probably the only backup offensive lineman on this team that's even worth considering. I've been of the mindset that I like the Milano approach to Teller of bringing him along slowly. I don't know that there's anything to gain by having him in there right now, and I don't know how much better actually he is going to be, except you might see more pancakes out of him than Vlad Dukas because he plays with that mean streak. What are your thoughts on the offensive line overall, but specifically the calls heating up for Teller to come in?
I think your analogy is spot on. I think that, Milano is a 5th-round pick. He had potential, but wasn't quite there. Had a disappointing veteran in front of him that I think was really difficult to be patient and let continue playing when it was Ramon Humber. Now we're there with whether it's John Miller or Vlad Dukas, and I think very clearly it's become John Miller that would be in question. I think a lot of people, kind of poo-pooed Vlad Dukas early on, and he's honestly been one of our steadier linemen thus far. Miller got toasted. I joked in the Slack chat earlier that the play where the linebacker came completely untouched and Miller sitting there blindly double teaming the nose tackle who was no threat whatsoever. A couple of those gaffes, that was the play that Josh Allen got lit up and was shaking his wrist, and if you have the wrong kind of whiff like that and we somehow let Allen get roughed up, that's a major hit to the development that we need this year. So that's the kind of play I would be nervous about letting Teller get reps. So if we're seeing that with the veteran already, I don't know exactly what the downside of letting Teller get reps are. I think pretty clearly we have not seen the development from John Miller to extend him or bring him back next year on anything other than a veteran minimum contract as a backup. So at some point here, and again, maybe we need to wait a little bit longer. I do think we need to see Wyatt Teller come in and play. Now, maybe that makes more sense later in the year. Offensive line takes longer to get developed and get in there. But, we traded off Newhouse and we had McDermott as the swing tackle today. Thank God he didn't have to play. Again, Mills is the most beleaguered, solid veteran in the NFL. Like, no one wants him. Everyone thinks he's trash. And all he does is continue starting and playing okay football. Now, he's going to get beat here or there, but almost all of our pressure was up the middle and coming from right in Allen's face. There was a couple plays that came around the outside from some blitzes, but very few of them were Dawkins or Mills getting beat. The vast majority were miscommunication between the center and guard or Miller getting beat straight up. So, it's tough when there's 7 sacks. I'm sure once we break down the film, I'm sure Dawkins and Mills had their plays, but it didn't seem as consistent as the interior pressure.
Yeah, it was a tough thing to watch. But if there's a silver lining here outside of your boy, the punter, who just keeps putting it inside the 20.
Oh, I'll get to Bojorquez.
Yeah, we'll get there. We're gonna put that as the cherry on top of the episode here. But the silver lining that I found, and there's a comment in here about how bad the team was by Marco here. Wide receivers don't get open, sketchy O-line play, vanilla OC calls, and the defense didn't adjust. I couldn't disagree more, actually. And while they still got beat, I thought the defense did actually a really good job today. Some big plays for sure, some things they didn't want to see from this defense. But overall, I thought the way they responded to getting down early, they really stuck their heels in to what the offense was providing for them. The lack of complementary football that they had to deal with all day long in a hostile environment with a great quarterback. The fact that they didn't put up 40 points or didn't give up 40 points, I thought was unbelievable, because that game could have easily been a 40-0 game. But this defense stood in. Like I said, I like their resolve to not get down on themselves early in this game. They very well could have. I think it was the second drive. They give up that huge blown coverage between Milano and Trey. Not really sure what happened there. Montgomery goes for whatever it was, 40, 50 yards down. And then they, cap that off with a pick play touchdown. Couple tough plays right there back to back on that drive to lead to points. And then really from there, it was a few plays that Packers were able to break. But other than that, they were really able to force Aaron Rodgers into almost a few picks. They punted quite a few times. They get the Taron Johnson fumble sack on Rodgers. So definitely a lot of things that they were able to do in this game that showed that they have a little bit of resolve to them, and there's some good talent. I mean, you saw the Edmonds jumping up and leading to that Poyer pick. I mean, it's some good stuff on this defense. So for me, that's the silver lining in this horrible loss.
Absolutely. I think that we saw really one long drive the entire game. The defense held up on multiple times on short fields where they were given the ball right at midfield, maybe just inside their own just at their own 40, but multiple turnovers and short fields. And they continually held most of them to a field goal, multiple stops. We had the stop on the fourth down that could have been a pick six. We had the stop on the interception itself. There were multiple plays that the defense actually played really solid. So overall, I think that we have to see that as encouraging. 19 or 22 points to Aaron Rodgers at home with multiple turnovers, 3 turnovers for them. And we only gave up 22 points, I guess 22 at the very end. 22 points is a huge win. I mean, the defense did their part. If you only give up 22 points to Aaron Rodgers, you give yourself a chance to win. So now, don't get me wrong, there were some rough plays in there. I go crazy about the pick plays and how they do that. The wheel route to Ty Montgomery early on that you touched on was a huge pick. That one was actually offensive pass interference for sure. The one down to the end zone, I think Geronimo Allison stopped short and just stood in front of the DB. And if the DB just ran through him and would have got tackled up, I think he could have drawn the flag. But I think that he saw him stop short and tried to stop and go around. And as soon as he hesitated, Jimmy Graham had the space that he needed. But beyond that, I mean, we really hung tough. They had a couple nice run plays. We had overall, you run 32 times. So they had 141 yards, but 4 yards a carry to run 32 times. I think that that's a tough, holding tight, especially late in the game when they're just trying to kill the clock. But holding Rodgers to almost 50% completions, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, that's a huge performance from the defense. They did their part overall.
No, they definitely did. I'm with you on those pick plays, man. That has been driving me nuts for years. If there's one thing I get emotional about, it's going to be pick plays and bad pass interference calls. So definitely drove me nuts there. But yeah, no, I thought there was a ton to be excited about this defense. I did see a lot of on Twitter and in the Slack channel, people were frustrated that the Bills weren't able to get to the quarterback and disrupt them the way they were with Cousins a week earlier. And people started making comments about Colin. McDermott's got to take this over from Frazier, all this stuff. And it's my opinion that obviously you're facing 2 very different quarterbacks. As high as I am on Cousins, he's not Aaron Rodgers. And if you start sending a lot of blitzes at Aaron Rodgers, he's going to find where you're not. You can't send blitzes without something being open on the back end, right? So he's going to find where you aren't, and he's going to get the ball there quick. He was getting the ball out in under 2 seconds most of the day. So he kind of had their hand forced to kind of sit back and try to keep everything in front of them. It didn't work all the time. There were some big plays that happened, but for the most part, they were able to keep everybody in front of them and force them to punt on a number of occasions, force a couple turnovers on a few occasions. So I didn't mind the defensive game plan at all against an Aaron Rodgers-led Packers team. And in fact, I think that defensive game plan, you mentioned the running numbers and some of those big runs. I think, again, I mentioned the Slack channel, that plays to what Aaron Rodgers is able to do. He is so good that he makes your defense susceptible to the run, because you have to tilt the scales towards him beating you so bad that it's going to open up some things in the run game. So the whole game revolves around Aaron Rodgers, and the fact that they were able to hold him, I know it sounds silly because they lost so bad, but to be able to hold him and their team to 22 points at Lambeau with as much as our offense was giving them back the ball so quickly and so many opportunities for them to come out and score was mind-blowing to me. I loved what we saw out of the defense. And I believe it was Leslie Frazier calling the plays, but the plan they put together, I thought, was good enough for winning football on the road.
Absolutely. I think that, one, the comments about, why doesn't he go back to take the play calling? I don't think we'll see that again, honestly. I think that he saw the threat that it had to just the teamwork of the coaching staff and what he and Frazier have been building. I think he's probably a little more involved than what he was beforehand. And I think that we're going to see more from that standpoint of his engagement and knowing what tendencies to look for, and maybe even some comments and being in Frazier's ear during the game. But just from the camaraderie and teamwork and the perception, I think that he's not going to take that back from Frazier again. I think that in this game, what you saw was an amazing quarterback. I made the comments in the Slack chat earlier. I think Aaron Rodgers is the most talented quarterback in NFL history. There's no arguing Tom Brady's resume, so I'm not here to say that he's the greatest quarterback, but I think I think that Aaron Rodgers is the most talented quarterback in NFL history, that he can make throws from different spaces and platforms that no one else can. He's playing the last 3 weeks on a sprained MCL with some serious knee issues, and the Bills had decent pressure. Now, there were a couple plays where he stood back there forever, but they had multiple plays where they hit him and pressured him, where he just got the ball out over and over and over again. A couple of them looked like absolute sacks. Milano had a sack that I was already counting on my sheet that Rodgers somehow got the ball out. So some of the plays today were on the defense not getting home. We are always going to be a team that sends 4 and that makes our coverage get there. Now they do shake it up a little bit, so you don't know which 4 are coming all the time, but we're going to be a team that sends 4 and that we rarely blitz, and that the 7 have to make their coverage and our 4 have to get home. Now we did see a couple, I think when they did send a blitz, Edwards got in there and shook him up on the play that caused one of the near turnovers. Taron Johnson got home on a blitz that did cause a turnover. So as we get into the individuals, I think that some of the exciting things we're seeing is some of the young players on defense really starting to show out and to flash. I think that we saw Poyer step up with Hyde being out. The fact that we continued to hold them to all field goals after Hyde went out, I think was a huge victory. And getting that pressure in the spaces that we could. Saran Neal also came home on a blitz and was able to get there and get pressure and get a hit in on Roger. So I think that we had plenty of positives on the defensive side. And as we're talking about the same way that each game we're going to be looking at the progression and development of Josh Allen on defense, the main centerpiece is going to be Tremaine Edmunds. Matt in the chat had asked a couple times. I thought that Tremaine Edmunds was fantastic today. We saw a tip. We saw him get home on a near sack. We saw a lot of involvement in run stuffs and in getting pressure, 6 tackles. And I think that the example we brought up before of, maybe this is a healthy game for the humble pie for Josh Allen today, it was the same way in that Chargers game, and that Edmunds has bounced back with back-to-back strong games here today and tomorrow. I'm excited to see Eric's all-22 breakdown, but I really think that Edmunds was very solid in the middle of that defense today.
Yeah, and I love that you bring up Edmunds, because another thing I want to talk about here, because we've been talking a lot about this development of Josh Allen, and obviously we spent a lot of time on that today. And I had some people rebuttal in that conversation, while Tremaine Edmunds also is a raw rookie, and those two things are not even close to the same.
Yeah, it's apples and oranges.
It's apples and oranges, totally different positions. He's playing with a lot more people with skills on that side of the ball by far. But I'm happy the development. At the end of the day, I don't care about the argument. I'm happy with his development. He seems to take to learning things and not making the same mistake twice, and that's what you want out of a guy that's getting thrown into playing middle linebacker in the NFL for the first time. So love what I'm seeing out of Tremaine Edmunds. But I want to switch over here to the defensive backs a little bit, because there was one thing that I did see today that kind of bothered me for a little while, but he bounced back. It was Trey White. Somebody that we haven't heard a lot about this year because he's been doing such a good job. Had a tough matchup today with Davante Adams, especially with that ball coming out quick. There was a few plays where Davante got him on the slant, I think multiple times. He got crisped up a few times, but he did bounce back, as Trey always does. He keeps his head on the game, made some nice plays on the ball, had the almost pick there late. But we finally had a quarterback, I think, that was not scared to attack him, whether or not Davante Adams was open or not, and it kind of picked on Trey a little bit. Glad that he bounced back. But that was a tough day, I think, for Trey. Definitely his toughest of the year.
Yeah, it's the first time, like you said, anyone's had the guts to really go at him. For the most part, we've taken things out. There was a couple plays where they had some kind of, confusion underneath that put Trey into a compromising spot a few times. So I don't think all of that was necessarily on Davante beating him and, just kind of tearing Trey up. I think a couple of them, they had some nice action in the play, in the pass routes that put him in a tough spot. But overall, like you said, it was great that even though he did give up a couple plays more than what he normally does, he bounced right back and was right there, made a couple plays. He almost came off his man and made a pick late, and then had another one right back to back that almost went there that you referenced, that he again, didn't let it get down on him, had that clean slate mentality to come back and look for the next play. And he's obviously one of the rock solid people that we're counting on going forward, and that we need him to help bring that message across to the rest of the young guys. I know another much maligned player that gets crap about his contract. I saw a couple flashes from Star Lotulelei today. He had some nice penetration on a couple plays, and really was the key in a couple of those third down stops, that even though, again, we didn't get home on all these, he had some legitimate pressure up in Rodgers' face on 2 plays that I marked, that help him get the ball out early and help stop 2 of the third downs that we were there for. So again, just trying to show an even-handed approach to somebody that has gotten a lot of, in my mind, kind of undue pressure is Star Lotulelei, that I think's had 3 solid games in a row now.
Yeah, I think Star's playing fine. I think he's an easy target for some fans just because of the contract or whatever. The contracts, I get people want to get into salary cap and stuff like that. To me, it's not really a big deal. That's something I take. Once they sign the contract, they're here on the team anyway. So what do I care about the money? Just go out and do your job. But yeah, no, Trey's becoming one of my favorite players in this organization. I just love everything that he's got going.
The energy.
Oh, dude, his energy is unbelievable. Even while I was watching the pregame warmups, and the dude just like even stretching, he just like stretches at another level. He's unbelievable, full of it. So great guy to have on this team. A guy though that is really stepping up. I didn't really love the pick in the draft. I didn't love that he was coming from a small school. Didn't have the arm length that you like to see at his position, things like that. I obviously was a big fan of Leonard Johnson, but Taron Johnson comes in, and he is doing a great job as well in his development early on, coming from as a small school guy, stepping up into a slot position, which I think people don't often realize, that playing slot cornerback isn't just you put the third best or, the fastest cornerback out there. You have to be a very good cornerback to play the slot position in the NFL. There's a lot more space to cover. You can't just push a guy to the sideline. There's a lot that goes into playing slot cornerback. And for a rookie to come in and play the way that he's played, obviously, he's gotten dinged up a few times because he hits so hard, harder than I think his frame might be able to handle at times. But outside of the injuries and that shoulder nagging, I'm very excited about what I'm seeing out of Johnson and want to see more of it. And if he can really lock down and be a solid slot cornerback position, that is a huge benefit where they picked him moving forward into those 2019, 2020 seasons that we talked about. If you have him and Trey locking down 2 of your 3 main defensive back spots.
No, I think you're spot on. Taron Johnson has been a hugely pleasant surprise in my mind. Like you said, 4th round pick, small school, not exactly ideal, measurables like you touched on, but was the normal McDermott competitor kind of guy, tough guy, a lot of starts in college, team captain, had a lot of those intangibles. And I think those show up on the field. Like you said, I'm a little bit nervous that he probably plays a little bit bigger than what his size belies, which is great, and reminds me of the Antoine Winfield kind of mold of a guy who's not afraid to stick his nose in there. But I'd like for him to be able to stay healthy. So he's lit himself up a couple times now with some tough shoulder injuries on big hits that he's made, but he ends up being the one that comes up lame after the big hit. So I think that he's really exciting and someone that if we hit on that in a 4th round pick, and like you said, nowadays a nickel corner is a starting spot. You're talking about 60% of the snaps. So having somebody like him, if we hit on that and you have that kind of contract control for the next 4 years, that's a huge victory. And that's 2 of your 3, in my mind, 2 of your 3 starting corners that you've now locked down that are all under rookie contracts. So I'm a big fan of Taron Johnson, and I think somebody that we should be excited about. In the comments, Marco brought up Ryan Lewis. I'll say he's one that is tough because from the broadcast view, he did flash a few times. He had a couple nice plays and breakups, but I will say he got toasted early and then started playing soft, and a ton of plays where you saw him come up. He led the team in tackles. He did not lead the team in tackles because he was out there sticking his nose in there. He led the team in tackles because he was playing 7 or 8 yards off and giving up a ton of completions that he then tackled after sizable gains. So I was, he's still an undrafted free agent. This is his first stretch on an NFL roster besides a practice squad. So we have to manage expectations with what we're going to get from him. But I'll say that he probably was a net negative today and is probably not going to grade out great. But I will say the couple of flash plays do give me some hope that there's more development for him. And if nothing else, when Phillip Gaines is healthy to come back, I think he's a nice NFL caliber roster depth that's there. So, it's a positive thing overall, but I think that the couple flash plays that he made might have overshadowed what was probably some pretty poor coverage.
Yeah, and it got brought up in the Slack channel about, frustration over the lack of defensive backs that they have on the active game day roster. I don't think you brought it up. It's not an abnormal amount. It's not like they're league low what they're bringing in. But what's exciting to me is, like you mentioned, when Gaines comes back or whoever their cornerbacks are, we keep talking about the future. That future is with Lewis getting some of this experience. Obviously, he's thrown into the fire. Don't think this was part of the plan going into the year to have Vontae Davis leave and then put them into this position depth-wise to be playing Lewis at this point. But getting this game experience is good. I think that his ceiling is probably to be one of those backup role cornerbacks where when a guy goes down, he comes in and can fill in. And that's a good thing to have. That's something right now that we don't have. If Lewis goes down, you have Pitts coming in, and who's after that? So if he can be that Pitts moving forward, when you have a little bit more top level talent, that's nice depth that you can have, that what he's capable of and what weaknesses maybe you have to hide from him. But like you said, those 7 tackles come from him getting picked on a little bit. He was the weak link in the defensive backs that Aaron Rodgers, a smart quarterback, when he went over to the sidelines a few times, saw this is open all day over here. I'm going to take this. This is easy money. And so they picked on him a little bit. He did make them pay, in a sense, for picking on him a couple of times, which I like to see, that composure and that mental toughness to be able to stay in a game when you're getting picked on. I think McDermott's going to love seeing that when he looks back at the tape, because a lot of guys, they get picked on and snowballs on them. So there's something there. But as far as like getting really excited about the guy, I'm just not there yet.
You touched on it perfectly. 2 of his pass breakups were specifically because Rodgers was going back there for a 9th and a 10th completion, and he broke those 2 up. But it was also after he had already just, isolated and embarrassed him early on. So it's great. Like you said, I agree. McDermott's going to like that, and it's going to show up well from a, just staying in the game and not letting it get down on you. But it was because he thought it was an automatic completion that he went back there. Now, I will say, if he could have converted on that pick 6, I would have forgiven a good chunk of it. But he still broke it up, and that was on a 4th down anyways. So, I'll give credit that Ryan Lewis has pass breakup on critical 4th down. So I'll still document that as a positive, but it would have been nice if he could have taken it back to the house and avoided the shutout.
Oh, yeah, big time. Now, I'm going to give you your time to shine here. We're going to move over to the special teams. But no, honestly, not to joke around about it, it's something that I often talk about. I hate having to talk about punters, mostly when things are going poorly. But honestly, this has been a really great surprise pickup that the Bills did. They brought in, John Ryan this year to compete with Colin Schmidt. They did everything to get Colin Schmidt to lose this job. He does. They get rid of him, and last minute they bring in a guy that nobody's heard of really. Again, stored on the Patriots practice squad, and he has come out and he has put the ball, I know you said inside the 20, but really he's been like at the 10-yard line on almost every punt within the 10. So great, pleasant surprise, especially when your team's punting as much as the Bills are this year. He might end up being the MVP outside of the defense. What are you liking right now, man?
Yeah, I think it's really encouraging. And again, I don't care. I'm going to bring it up every week. The fact that we stole him from Bill Belichick makes him worth 10 times more than what he's actually worth to me. So I'll take that as a positive. But Corey Bojorquez is a great find, because now you're talking about an undrafted rookie free agent who is going to be one of those exclusive rights free agents that we have access to from a contract standpoint for a long time. He looks to be really, really solid from both the length and the directional punting standpoint. Today was tough because we again had some spots where we weren't in a great position for him to really let it fly. He had 2 punts that were actually just so today, but he had 4 put inside the 20. Again, 0 touchbacks. So besides the one that we let bounce into the end zone, it's his only touchback on the season. So he's consistently putting us into a positive position to let that be a game-changing ability from flipping the field and controlling the field position. So in the game today, if we had that, again, last week was weird. We actually haven't had a close competitive game yet this season where field position and some of those things make a bigger deal. But I do feel like he's someone who's going to give us the opportunity to be able to do that when that time comes. So being able to be in a position where we can, have opportunities to, flip fields, pin a team deep, let our defense, which now looks to be getting their bearings and playing better, let them try to get a stop and get us the ball back. I feel like he's someone who's going to let us do that.
Yeah, no, definitely exciting stuff there, and just another position maybe that they don't have to worry about dealing with moving forward here, and you can lock that down for some time. Overall here, before we wrap this up, because we're getting to that time of the evening where we got to wrap it up. Overall, how are you feeling about this team after this game? Obviously, we got some highs after last week, brought back down to reality a little bit this week. But overall, give us your take here now that the evening's settling in on you, the game and just the team moving forward.
Sure. I'd be lying if I said I felt great today. It's still a loss. It still was a loss in a poor game from Josh Allen. So I think that you have to have a realistic view. He's going to have these games. This isn't going to be the last bad game that he has this year or into the future. But it's still a bad game, and I'd prefer not to see that. So I think you take it with a grain of salt. You don't let it beat you up. We had plenty of positives. We rattled off a ton of other nice young players that had good games. We went through quite a few on defense. We talked about Taron Johnson. We talked about Tremaine Edmonds. We talked about Matt Milano. We talked about Saran Neal flashed here and there. Some young players that really stepped up and played well. Heck, even a punter, Corey Borges. So we have some positive things that came from today, and that's what each of these games should be. Every single game should be approached in who is in a position to make a positive impact on the 2020 Bills team. If someone looks like they can contribute to that and be here under contract control and that they're going to be a contributing factor, and then by the time we have 2 more off seasons of drafts and free agent signings to add to that, that's what we're looking for. So I feel good that we saw that and checked that box for 5, 6, 8 different players today. Obviously we need to hope for some health with Micah Hyde, need to hope that some other people come out of this positively, but overall, that's what we should be looking for every week is development from our young guys, positive plays, and then hopefully a couple more wins so we can enjoy those just as fans. But overall, I think that that's what we should be looking for, and that's what we got today.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with everything you said. I've been all about this year being about evaluation and collecting that data, if you will, for what you're looking for and putting a plan together for the 2019-2020 seasons. You can't really have a plan in place until you know what you got here under the contract control. So for me, that's where I'm at with this team. And I saw some really nice things from some of those guys today that you want to see step up. Obviously, there's some other guys that you want to see develop a little bit more. Definitely my worst case scenario did happen in that every time the Bills get a little bit of any type of national recognition or somebody does well, that they come out and vomit all over themselves the next week. And we saw that with Josh Allen. It's going to be a long week for fans on Twitter who want to deal with the national media and get into those fights with those guys because they definitely have some ammo against Josh Allen's development. But again, I urge you guys to try to think of it not in a linear development and don't get caught up in the overreaction Mondays that's coming with what people are going to say, and just know that is going to be an up and down rocky road, and some weeks are going to look like this and some weeks are going to look better, but try not to get caught up too much in the hype that's going to ensue on Twitter over the next 7 days. And we just got to wait another 7 days, guys, and then we'll have another game, and it might not be that good, it might be better, and then we'll be able to talk about that. So Greg, where can the people that are coming here for the first time, don't know who we are, where can they find you and interact with you?
Please come and find me on Twitter at Greg Tompsett, GregTompsett. Love to follow back Bills fans and interact and go back and forth. I try to be the voice of reason sometimes when those national pundits get on their high horse. Try to help see the long-term view, and look forward to having interaction and discussion with any Bills fans that we can.
Yeah, that's a very creative name. that you picked out for your Twitter.
I try. I get crazy sometimes.
Yeah, and mine, super creative, is Aaron Quinn at 716. So I added some numbers to who I am, but I'm not the voice of reason. I am full of hot takes, and I am out there attacking people. So if you want some of that, come here. No, for the most part, I try to be pretty.
Yeah, you're usually pretty reasonable.
I try to be reasonable. Sometimes, Nate Geary will get me going. He'll get me going. I'll end up in his mentions. Eric will get me all riled up. I'll get over there too. So sometimes you'll see me with some hot takes, but definitely follow both of us. Make sure that you follow everything that Cover One's doing. All the social media platforms. Just search Cover One. You'll find us on Twitter, Facebook. You can find us, Instagram, everywhere you're at. Make sure you go, if you're here on YouTube tonight, make sure when you leave here, you head over and subscribe to the channel. Make sure you click that bell to get notified anytime that we go live, because then you get to enjoy Greg and I, or Nate, whoever's on live with us. We'll be on live this Wednesday talking about the Titans. So I'm not sure who we're going to have on for that yet, but we're on every week on Wednesdays and Sundays for a little get you ready, primed up for the game, and then the post-game show. Head over to cover1.net for all the content that we provide. If you're here and you know who Cover One is, I don't have to tell you about the content. It speaks for itself. But one thing that I do want to tell you about real quick before we leave is the premium membership. Greg's a premium member. I've been a premium member. When you go become a premium member, you get access to the Slack channel, which is a ton of fun during the game, talking with the other guys in the Slack channel. And all week long, really, we break down stuff. Eric sends us little tidbits, like we're starving babies looking for some film. He sends them out to us first. So we get to kind of talk about it and divulge it. So head over to cover1.net, find the premium membership login. It's $25 for the year. It's really a great membership compared to a lot of the memberships out there. What I get out of that membership is phenomenal. So head over there if you want to become a premium member. That helps support Cover One to keep going, putting out the content, getting the editors, the tools that they need, getting everybody, the video editing stuff, getting everybody the tools they need to keep pumping out top level Bills content for you guys. So we can't do it without you. We really appreciate that you guys come onto the show and are reading the articles and following us on social, because you keep everything going. So hang in there, guys. It's not going to be the week that it was last week. We're not going to be able to really rub it in anyone's faces. It's going to be a long week. We're going to have to take some on the chin, but hang in there because it will get better. Maybe not in the next 12 weeks, but at some point it will get better. So enjoy the evening. Greg, anything you want to say before we head out of here, man?
No, I will echo your comments. I think the premium membership on Cover One is fantastic. I do love the Slack channel. That's by far my favorite part, just to have our own private little world where we get to talk Bills. But the videos that are out there, the breakdowns, Fernando and the team, that there's so many guys bringing really intelligent commentary out there. Great breakdowns. Eric's video breakdowns are second to none. They're unbelievable. It's why he works with The Athletic. So everything that we have out there is fantastic and something we should be proud of. And I welcome you guys to take part of it. So,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, hang in there. Everybody hang tough. Hopefully we'll have a better outcome next week. But I sadly feel like this won't be our last rough outing of the year.
Yeah, but that's all right. We got you guys covered no matter if it's good or bad. And the coverage hopefully is always good. So we'll see you guys Wednesday evening, right around 7, 8 o'clock. We're a breakdown of the Titans. And other than that, stay tuned and go Bills.